Hello you, welcome back to Geekism and part 2 of our first ever creative scenario in Planet Coaster, which is going to be called Red Planet. First thing I do here is drop down the UFO to a more manageable height, because a few people commented that that's not the height you would have a UFO. Well, why? What height's that then, is it? Jesus. Anyway, we dropped it down. It looks a bit better where it is, so that's fine. Also, I got rid of you'll see a chair plane down there. That was just to get some people down for the screenshot in the last episode. That's now long gone as well. So in this episode, I'm going to start off with a little time lapse where I'm going to pretty much build kind of all I'm going to build in the place. People suggested some really great stuff, and I had a good think about it. And to be honest with you, I thought that, you know what? I'm building this in a very different way than I normally would. This has got to run on potatoes. This has got to give almost a blank canvas to people who want to, play the scenario. So for that reason, we're not going to be having loads and loads of different buildings. Excuse me, I'm allergic to the word buildings. We're not going to have loads of different buildings. We're not going to have loads of stuff set out already. It's going to be a relatively blank canvas for people to play. The idea of this scenario is not going to be based around, managing around difficult buildings in place or difficult terrain in place, although that could work really well for a scenario. It's not really what I want to go for here, being my first one. So other than the UFO coming down here and this sort of second go I had at a sort of light bridge force field type thing, I guess, which I think's turned out really quite nicely. Apart from those two and the sort of airlock entrancey type gate that we're going to build in a minute, there's not going to really be that many other buildings in the park. It's going to be there for people to really kind of build as they want to, because that's the point. It's people being sort of creative in how they accomplish the goals. Talking of the goals, we had some really great suggestions off people, including using a very low height restriction on coasters, so that because like low gravity would mean that you've got to keep the coasters pretty low to the ground. There were some really great suggestions that unfortunately with the limitations of the scenario editor we can't do. It's not really fair saying limitations. It's incredibly detailed and open, the scenario editor, but obviously there are certain things you can't do. So a few people suggested having the friction permanently set lower on all the coasters to simulate the sort of lower gravity and lower G-forces. Fortunately, that's not something you can do. A few other really good suggestions as well that just unfortunately don't work with the current system we've got. But some of the stuff that does work really well. I mentioned in the last episode that I thought it'd be good for everyone to be really thirsty because Mars is very hot. A few people rightly pointed out to me that Mars is actually quite cold, usually about minus 60, something like that. I'll be honest with you, and I'm not just saying this. I did know that. Like in the back of my head, I knew that Mars was cold, even though a lot of the time we used to think it was hot. And I think the problem was I've got in my head, it's something I didn't really mention much, is that I've got a very much of a B-movie version of Mars in my head, which is kind of what I'm going for a little bit here because it fits the scenery very much. All the scenery is very B-movie, very early Star Trek, things like that. And they obviously sort of played up Mars to be very quite hot back in the day. Obviously now we know, that it is actually quite cold. But the idea of them being thirsty, I thought, could still work. And a few people mentioned this actually, making people thirsty and hungry, because at the end of the day, as modern technology stands at the moment, it would take you about 200 odd days to get to Mars. Chances are that in the future we might have some sort of cryo system set up to get here, so they put you to sleep and you wake up 200 days later or 100 days later, depending on how quick we've managed it, and you would probably be starving. So I like the idea of making everyone thirsty and hungry, because that's going to be one of your first things to do, is sort of set up some food shops and get some income coming in from food shops. The other stuff that people suggested was that we would probably have mostly adults coming to the park. A trip to Mars is probably not something you'd do with a small child. So we're going to have mostly adults and teen groups, and also those adults and teens would be they would be quite thrill seekers, because they've travelled to outer space, for Christ's sake. They're not going to be ones who shy away from a good thrill. So bearing that in mind, the rides that you're going to be looking to build are high intensity thrill ride, flat rides, and obviously coasters as well. But then with the restriction on the height of the coasters, you're going to be limited in what you can do there. This all then ties in with what we're going to be also doing regarding the research tree. We are going to have research in this. It's not going to have all the rides available. You're going to have to research stuff to figure out what is best, and obviously Things like the carousel, things like the the vintage car track ride, they're not going to be available in this scenario. It's going to be all sci-fi futuristic stuff, extreme thrill rides and coasters, especially eventually launched coasters, I think, because that'll probably be a kind of easy way of finishing off the scenario if you're struggling with the height restrictions, but that'll be much later on. There's loads of other features as well that we can set in. There's going to be a third episode of this series where we actually do all that live, although I'm going to keep some of it back because I'd like some of it to be a bit of a surprise for people who have a go at completing the scenario themselves. But yeah, you'll see here we've got the gates here. I've set up 3 gates, only if for nothing else than to kind of push people around the crater. That's the kind of idea. I like the idea of this UFO being in the middle and people have to work their way around the larger crater. So here, I've done this here to kind of give people a push towards the right direction. The great gates themselves don't actually do anything. And then all I'm doing here is getting rid of the original entrance, kind of flattening out that terrain. Like I say, I do a little bit of work with the terrain here, but not much, to be honest, because I want it to be relatively flat. I am going to be turning terrain off, so you can't affect terrain. That's somebody mentioned it'd be a good idea to have not the ability to edit terrain, because they're on Mars. It would probably be they need to keep it stable because the atmosphere is a bit funky, and also just you're on a different planet, you don't want to be messing things up. I wanted to kind of give a bit of lore behind the fact that the humans are just walking around without space helmets on. So I thought of the idea of building this big force field around the park. And this accomplishes a few things. One, like I say, it kind of gives you a bit of a reasoning behind the fact that there are people walking around without spacesuits on, but also it shows you at a glance your build area and the size you've got to build, and also can go towards explaining why the height is limited on the coasters, because the force field only goes up so high. I mean, obviously in an ideal world I'd like to do something like build a huge dome over the top, but I think that would be a waste of pieces and probably look a bit too intense. So did a little bit of terrain work here, creating a few sort of craters and stuff. A lot of this has been inspired by a screenshot that Rudy Renkamel sent me of an old park that he played ages ago back in Alpha, called Moon, I think it was called, or Moon 1. That looked awesome. I don't know how much he did. Like I say, I was just looking at the screenshot, but in the screenshot there was these craters, and I think they turned out really quite nice. I'm no expert with the terrain paints, by the way. They look a little bit ropey. I think I might have to have a little bit of time off camera sorting those out. So there you go. There's our gates. Those are our gates. And the last thing I planted down are some of these crazy trees that we built a long time ago on a live stream. I think I forgot all about them. Found them by random, and I thought, you know what, we'll stick a few of them down, make it look a bit colourful. So let's dive into live and have a look how it all plans out. There we go. So like I say, shorter episode today. And really just wanted to get the build finished, and like I say, some great ideas of things to build, but I really wanted to keep it a blank canvas for people to come in and build their own parks. I can't wait to see what some of you do with this. There is going to be a third episode that should come out in the next few days, where we actually look at the objectives part of the scenario. Which is this big old box here. So we have to figure out specifically what you have to do, and then also we're going to go in here and edit some of the guest features and stuff like that, and research and things like that. I'm going to keep some of it a bit of a surprise, okay? You're not going to see every single thing that goes into this scenario, because I really want you guys to play it and tell me how you get on with it as well. So but we're going to come in here, so please, suggestions specifically for either objectives or just some of these. I'm sure some of you have looked over these a lot more than I have, okay? So let me know anything you think in here that you might think of that will work well for this sort of scenario, all that sort of stuff. That'd be awesome. So yeah, please do that. So there you go. There is the 3 gates there. Like I say, in the future, there's possibilities to build all off these different paths here. All of the scenery will be locked though, so you are going to have to kind of build around it. And then we have these here, these sort of gates here. The idea is the laser, carries on all around the area, and that's what's given us the atmosphere. How to explain the trees on the thing there, I don't know. Obviously, if we ever get modding and all this sort of stuff can be changed, we'll come back in here and do a Red Planet 2. How's that? Thank you so much for watching. Like I say, apologies it's a slightly shorter video today, but I'm still sort of catching up from a few days back at home. We'll return to hopefully regular full content next week, although obviously Christmas coming up, there will probably be a couple of gaps here and there where I'm just not able to get to the computer due to sort of family engagements and things like that. But But there you go, yeah, there's Red Planet Part 2. Next one, we'll flesh this out, and then we'll stick it on the workshop, see if you guys can beat it. Thank you so much for watching, hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give us a like, it really does help out the channel. And if you're not already, don't forget to subscribe. Any thoughts, queries, or suggestions, you can pop them down in the comments. If you fancy a chat, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at JohnTSparrow. If you'd like to join in with the Geekism community, you can do so over on our Geekism Discord server. You'll find the link in the description. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.